If you ever rent a beach house in a place you've never heard of, read the reviews carefully, lock the doors, and if you hear footsteps circling the house after midnight, don't go outside to investigate, because some sounds are meant to keep you inside. And some people spend years wishing they had ignored their curiosity. 27-year-old Ethan Brooks wasn't looking for adventure, he was looking for a break. After months of exhausting work, he and 4 friends planned a weekend getaway along a remote stretch of coastline known as Driftwood Cove. The place wasn't famous. In fact, Ethan had never heard of it before. That was part of the appeal. No crowds, no tourist traps, no packed beaches, just a quiet rental house overlooking the ocean. The listing looked perfect. The photos showed a weathered 2-story beach house sitting alone near the shoreline. Behind it stretched miles of dunes and coastal grass. Ahead lay nothing but ocean. The nearest town was almost 30 minutes away, exactly the kind of place where they could relax. On Friday afternoon, Ethan, his girlfriend Sarah, his best friend Tyler, Tyler's sister Megan, and another friend named Chris arrived at Driftwood Cove. The drive itself felt strange. The farther they traveled, the emptier the roads became. Cell service disappeared several miles before they reached the property. Even GPS struggled to maintain a signal. By the time they arrived, the only sounds were crashing waves and wind moving through the dunes. The house looked exactly like the photos, maybe a little older, maybe a little more isolated, but otherwise identical. The owner had left a key in a lockbox. No check-in, no greeting, no neighbors nearby, just instructions printed on a sheet of paper inside the kitchen. Most of them were normal: trash collection, parking information, emergency numbers. One instruction stood out: do not leave the property after midnight. Everyone laughed. Chris immediately held up the paper. "What is this, a horror movie?" Tyler grinned. "Maybe the owner doesn't want people wandering around drunk." Nobody thought much about it. They unpacked, cooked dinner, spent the evening on the deck overlooking the ocean. The sunset was beautiful. By midnight, everyone felt relaxed. The weekend seemed perfect. At approximately 1:15 a.m., Ethan woke up. At first, he wasn't sure why. The bedroom was dark. Sarah slept beside him. The ocean could be heard through the windows. Then he heard it. Footsteps outside, slow, steady, crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound seemed to circle the house. Ethan sat up. The footsteps continued. Whoever was outside moved slowly across the sand, not running, not sneaking, just walking, a complete lap around the house. Then another, then another. Ethan frowned. The property was supposed to be isolated. Who would be walking around at 1 in the morning? He quietly approached the window. Outside was darkness. Moonlight illuminated portions of the beach, the dunes, the shoreline, nothing else, no person, no flashlight, nothing. Yet the footsteps continued, crunch, 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 somewhere below, circling. Eventually the sound stopped. Ethan returned to bed. The next morning he mentioned it during breakfast. To his surprise, Megan looked uncomfortable. "I heard it too," Tyler nodded. "So did I," Chris laughed. "It was probably an animal." "An animal walking around the house for 30 minutes?" Megan asked. Nobody had an answer. The discussion ended quickly. The day itself was enjoyable. They explored the beach, collected shells, swam, took photographs. Everything felt normal again until late afternoon. While walking along the shoreline, Ethan noticed an elderly man sitting alone near an old fishing boat. The man watched the ocean silently. As Ethan passed, the stranger spoke. "You staying in the blue house?" The question caught him off guard. "Yeah," the old man nodded slowly, then looked away. Several moments passed. Finally he said, "Don't go outside if you hear it." Ethan stopped. "Hear what?" The old man stared toward the waves. "The walking." A chill ran through Ethan. "What are you talking about?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked away, leaving Ethan alone on the beach. That night nobody mentioned the encounter. Ethan wasn't even sure he wanted to. The story sounded ridiculous. Around midnight everyone went to bed. At exactly 12:47 a.m. the footsteps returned. This time everyone heard them. The sounds moved across the sand outside, slow, deliberate, circling the house. One complete lap, then another, then another. The group gathered in the living room. Nobody looked amused anymore. Chris pulled back a curtain. What the hell? The beach outside appeared empty. The footsteps continued, yet nobody could see the source. Tyler grabbed a flashlight. "I'm checking." "No, you're not," Sarah immediately replied. "Why?" "Because that's insane." The footsteps continued circling. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Eventually they stopped again. Silence returned. Nobody slept well that night. The next morning, Ethan decided to learn more about Driftwood Cove. The town itself was tiny. Only a handful of businesses remained open. Most locals seemed reluctant to talk. Eventually, Ethan visited a small diner near the harbor. When he mentioned the rental house, the waitress immediately recognized it. The Walker house. Ethan blinked. "The what?" She looked surprised. "You don't know?" "No." The waitress hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Years ago, a man disappeared out there." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. What happened? Nobody knows. She glanced toward the window. One night he left his house, and he never came back. The silence that followed felt uncomfortable. Then she added, "People started hearing footsteps after that." Ethan forced a laugh. "You don't actually believe that?" The waitress didn't smile. "I wouldn't stay there after dark." That evening, dark clouds rolled across the coastline. Wind intensified. The ocean became rough. By sunset, everyone felt uneasy. Nobody openly admitted it, but Ethan could tell. The house no longer felt relaxing. It felt isolated, exposed, wrong. At 1:03 a.m., the footsteps began again. Only this time something was different. The sound stopped directly beneath Ethan's bedroom window. For nearly 30 seconds, there was complete silence. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed against the glass. The 3 knocks echoed through Ethan's bedroom. Knock, knock, knock. For a moment, nobody moved. The sound hadn't come from the front door. It hadn't come from downstairs. It had come directly from the window. On the second floor, more than 15 feet above the sand, Ethan felt every muscle in his body tighten. Beside him, Sarah sat upright in bed. "You heard that right." Before Ethan could answer, another knock struck the glass, slower this time. More deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. The sound seemed impossibly close, as though someone was standing outside the window looking in. Ethan slowly approached the curtain. Every instinct told him not to, but curiosity won. It always does. He grabbed the edge of the curtain and pulled it aside. Nothing. The window overlooked the beach below. Moonlight illuminated the sand, the dunes, the ocean. No ladder, no balcony, no person, no explanation, yet someone or something had just knocked on a second-story window. Sarah immediately pulled him away. "Close it." Ethan did. Neither of them slept for the rest of the night. The next morning, the entire group looked exhausted. Everyone had heard the knocks. Nobody wanted to be the first to suggest leaving, but the idea hung in the air. Finally, Megan spoke. "We should just go home." Nobody disagreed. The problem was that a severe coastal storm had arrived overnight. Road flooding had shut down the main route out of Driftwood Cove. According to local authorities, nobody would be leaving until at least the next morning. The news immediately ruined whatever sense of comfort remained. They were stuck. At least one more night, the weather worsened throughout the day. Rain hammered the coastline. Power flickered repeatedly. The ocean looked violent. Grey waves crashed against the shore with enough force to shake the house. By evening, Ethan found himself staring out the living room window. Something about the beach bothered him. Then he noticed it, a line of footprints, fresh footprints. They stretched across the wet sand directly toward the house. His pulse quickened. The tracks emerged from the direction of the shoreline. They continued all the way to the property, then stopped. No return tracks, no second set, just footprints leading to the house, nothing leading away. Ethan called the others over. Nobody could explain it. The rain should have washed them away. Instead, they remained visible, almost as if they had appeared recently, very recently. The group locked every door and window before sunset. Nobody laughed about the situation anymore. Nobody made jokes. They simply wanted the night to end. At 12:41 a.m., the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. Only flashlights and phone screens illuminated the rooms. Outside, the storm howled. The ocean roared. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then the footsteps returned, crunch, 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 circling the house slowly, methodically. The sound seemed louder than before, closer. The group sat together in the living room. Nobody spoke, they simply listened. One complete lap, then another, then another. The footsteps never changed pace, never hurried, never stopped, as though whoever was outside had all the time in the world. Then Chris suddenly stood up. "I've had enough." Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the front door. "Chris." Tyler rushed after him, but it was too late. The front door opened. Cold wind exploded into the house. Rain blew inside. Chris stepped onto the porch. His flashlight beam swept across the darkness. The beach appeared empty. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Chris froze. The flashlight stopped moving. His expression changed instantly. Fear, real fear, the kind that appears before someone fully understands what they're seeing. "What is it?" Ethan shouted. Chris didn't answer. The flashlight trembled in his hand. Then he slowly pointed toward the dunes. Everyone looked. At first, Ethan saw nothing. Then lightning flashed. The entire beach illuminated for a fraction of a second, and Ethan finally saw it. A person standing among the dunes, motionless, watching the house. The distance made details impossible to identify. Only the silhouette was visible, tall, thin, completely still. Then darkness returned. Chris backed toward the house, without taking his eyes off the figure. The moment he crossed the doorway, Tyler slammed the door shut. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Several seconds later, the footsteps resumed. Only now they sounded different because they were no longer circling the house. They were approaching it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Closer, closer. Closer, the sound reached the porch, then stopped. The entire house fell silent. The group waited. 1 minute passed, then another. Nothing happened. Ethan almost convinced himself it was over. Then the front doorknob slowly turned. Everyone froze. The knob rotated fully, stopped, then rotated again. Whoever stood outside wasn't knocking. They were trying to get in. Sarah began crying. Megan covered her mouth. The doorknob continued moving, back and forth, for nearly 30 seconds. Then it stopped. Silence returned, and suddenly, a voice spoke from outside, soft, calm, human. "Can you let me in?" The room went completely still. The voice belonged to a man, ordinary, normal, which somehow made it worse. Nobody answered. The voice came again. "Please." A pause, then, "I've been walking for a very long time." The words sent a chill through Ethan, because they matched something the waitress had said earlier. A man who left the house, a man who never came back. The voice continued. "I'm almost home." Then silence. Minutes passed, no footsteps, no movement, nothing. Eventually dawn arrived. The storm weakened. The first sunlight illuminated the beach. The group cautiously stepped outside. The porch was empty. The dunes were empty. The shoreline was empty, but something remained. Fresh footprints, hundreds of them, covering the sand around the house, circling it, over and over, some overlapping, some deeper than others. As though someone had spent hours walking around the property, yet all the tracks belonged to a single person. The road reopened later that morning. The group left Driftwood Cove immediately. None of them ever returned. Years passed. The experience gradually became something they rarely discussed, a nightmare best forgotten. Then nearly 4 years later, Ethan received an email. No subject line, no sender name. Attached was a single photograph. The image showed the rental house at Driftwood Cove, taken recently. At first it appeared ordinary. Then Ethan noticed the beach. A lone figure stood beside the house, facing the camera. Even from a distance, Ethan recognized the posture, the silhouette, the stance, the same figure they had seen among the dunes. At the bottom of the photograph was a timestamp. The picture had been taken at 1:03 a.m., the exact time the knocking started. Ethan immediately searched online for the rental listing. The property no longer existed. The house had been demolished 2 years earlier after severe storm damage. According to official records, nothing remained on the site. No house, no rental property, no residence, just an empty stretch of coastline. Yet someone had taken a photograph there, and when Ethan zoomed in on the image one final time, he noticed something that still keeps him awake at night. The figure wasn't standing beside the house. It was standing at the second-floor window, looking out, waiting for someone to look back. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark, and if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.